Took national media to have a little interest in a story out of Idaho, and all of a sudden, all of your local Idaho news outlets, from old-fashioned newspapers to television stations, are doing follow-ups on this. I was referring to the story that the Atlantic did about the cobalt mines in Idaho, and these mines could give us a bit of national security when it comes to rare earth minerals, at least one very important rare earth mineral. But I'd also mentioned in the last segment of the program that I'd first learned about this last year from Dara and Dorothy Moon, who have a background as geologists, and they live in that particular area. They live on a mountaintop in Chalice, and or near there, and they gave me some details about this in an interview we did many, many months ago. And I thought it would be worth, after the story in the Atlantic this week, revisiting all of this. Dorothy, of course, is legislating today, but Dara is busy doing housekeeping. and actually, he's been running some other errands, very important errands, the last few weeks. First of all, welcome back to the program.
Well, thanks, Bill, for having me. Yeah, I'm getting pretty good at this housework.
Yes, I wish I could say the same, but I can't. But to begin with, we talked about this a little yesterday on the program, and we had some interesting, interest from people who were sending us messages on the app and some telephone callers. I don't think anybody in my audience is opposed to the idea of going after these materials. I think, though, that there's just concern about the safety of it all. But even I think that the Atlantic, which is a fairly liberal publication, came to the conclusion that all the precautions are there. And you've been in this business for a long, long time. You're a proponent of what they're doing.
Absolutely. America needs these critical and metals and resources. And Idaho is so blessed with an entire suite of rare and strategic metals found, relatively few places in the world. And cobalt is one of them. And I think that, even the liberals, the lefty side, the environmentalists are realizing that they can't have their vision of the future without some of these metals. Cobalt being very necessary in the battery industry, these new lithium batteries. It's in your cell phone, in your laptops, and now in cars, and all sorts of things that are planned for this green world. Unfortunately, their green world, they're relying on resources out of China or controlled by China. Cobalt is mined in the Congo with slave labor, essentially, and with no environmental protections. So, here in America, we have these resources. We need to use them, and we can mine them, and we can do that conscious of the environment. We've got, people that have graduated in all these environmental degrees that certainly could go to work on these kinds of things. But we can't live without it. Well, I guess we can, but we'll live on our knees without it, and we'll be subject to, the world domination of these critical resources by China. So, people need to wake up to it. I think they are. I think the Atlantic article was a good first step. But people of the nation need to realize that we are much more destitute for these metals than we ever have been with oil. Because, Trump was able to bring us back to number one in oil production, but we have been importing these metals well over 90% of most of the suite that's necessary, even to put up our military jets, to run our fleets, to run our high-tech computers.
It wouldn't take long.
So here we are.
Yeah, it wouldn't take long, because if all of a sudden, we get into a not even necessarily a shooting match, but we get into a diplomatic match with China, and that could happen just through the Russian situation. China could snatch Taiwan, and then all of the chips that we use, the semiconductors, are gone. But China cuts off that entire supply of rare earth minerals, and the Iranians shut off the Straits of Hormuz. We would last about 3 weeks, I would guess.
We're in a very dangerous situation on that front. Because we've neglected the development of our own natural resources for now 50 years. And these things won't just turn on a dime. The process for permitting a mine today is well over 10 years. The costs associated in the bonding and the development is astronomical. And so when you throw in all the environmental factors and regulatory factors, um, American companies have gone overseas. And unfortunately, even there too, a good amount of the mining today around the world is not done by Americans. It's done by the Canadians and the Australians and Chinese proxies. So we're in a world of hurt. And this has been coming over the last 50 years. I graduated from the School of Mines in Idaho, University of Idaho, in 1981. In the year 2001, they closed the school. So we're no longer even producing the kinds of people that are necessary to explore, discover, develop, and manage the great resources that we have right here in Idaho.
You mentioned that. I remember the first time I toured the Sierra mine up in Wallace, and the tour guide was explaining to us that there used to be a classroom right inside the mine because
Yes.
they'd have teenagers who would have an interest in making that a career. So what they would do is they'd get some on-the-job training, but they'd still have English class and math class, and all of these things would take place inside a room that was carved into the mine. And that program obviously long gone too. So somebody decided that we didn't need these things any longer, that the world would be perfect and that we could walk away from it.
Well, it's very unfortunate. I was one of those kids in that mine, in Hecla's Star Mine. We did some of our geology work. Idaho had those deep underground mines, and the technology at the time, we were leading in the field for rock bursting and being able to mine down, at these very deep levels. So that's gone. We've got a long ways to go to catch up. And we have a huge, almost $30 trillion debt that's going to be paid for in some form. And, we don't feel it now. Well, we're beginning to feel it now because everything's much more expensive uh, because we don't produce it here in America anymore. And the supply chain is broken. And all of these problems are starting to appear. And the one that will catch us very hard is that we no longer have control of the metals and minerals that we need. In particular, this cobalt is strategic, necessary, and really only two places in the world where there is the capacity to mine reserves to make it worthwhile. But we also have thorium, probably the next nuclear fuel, much safer than uranium. Our guys at INL are working on these thorium nuke plants. The rare earths that you mentioned between Idaho and Montana along the Lemhi Pass is one of the world's largest reserves. You can't get an F-35 off the ground without them. There's about 980 pounds in each aircraft. There's several tons in an Aegis cruiser. So our backs are really up against the wall, and there's no time left to really solve the problem. So we're going to be at the mercy of foreign suppliers for some time. But we better wake up and we better get on it because that $30 trillion debt is going to be paid in some form, whether it's your pension or whether it's in some bloody conflict. We don't seem to feel it very much now, but we will begin to in the days ahead.
I had an argument, probably close to 15 years ago with a sitting member of the U.S. House of Representatives who's gone. He got term limited eventually by voters who had enough of him. But at the time, I was saying that we should be drilling on the north slope of Alaska because it'd be good for national security reasons. And he said, "Oh, that's our reserve." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, we may need it someday, so we should just leave it alone." I said, "Well, it's going to take 10 years to get everything into place. If we get into a big shooting war, we don't have 10 years to follow your plan." And he just looked at me as if, I was the one who was apparently, lost my mind. But here's the thing. We've got this ability to take these materials out of the ground. The Atlantic story referenced about 6 years in the permitting process already on the cobalt mines. We got to figure out a way to shorten that.
Well, we do, and they're trying to lengthen the time now. And right now, here we have very low interest rates, and the mines are beginning to try to get their bonds in place, and they're being held up. And every day that goes by and interest rates are expected to rise here in March, this is millions and millions of dollars more. So, it's death by 1,000 regulatory cuts. And that will affect us. That's going to affect everybody in this nation. It's foolhardy. We've been on this green environmental path for 50 years, and look where it has led us. And to believe that our world is any more um, safe from environmental damage is foolish. Dorothy and I and the family went to China in 2007, where a lot of this milling and processing is being done. And if you want to talk about pollution, if you want to, give our dirty laundry to the Chinese to wash, they'll gladly do it, and with no regard for the environment. Flying over there, you don't see blue sky until you're at 30,000 feet, and the rivers and everything is terribly polluted. But we could do a better job here in America, and we need to do a good job in America. But we can no longer neglect the bounty that especially Idaho has. And in our environment, everybody's talking about raising property taxes and the cost of a hamburger today. It used to be lunch was $5. Now we stopped at a burger place. It was $11 for just one little meal. This is going to wipe us all out, and yet Idaho sits at with great opportunity, and it always has. Many people don't realize, they think of Idaho and they think of potatoes, but it wasn't potatoes that brought people to Idaho. It was the great gold strikes in Silver City and in Idaho City. And most people don't realize how important those strikes were to the Civil War. In 1863, the gold discoveries in the Boise Basin financed the Union Army. And there was more gold taken out of the Boise Basin than the Yukon strikes. So Idaho has always been the ace in the hole with metals. And of course, North Idaho was the world's largest producer of silver for a very long time. And we've got to go back. We've got to look backwards to see how our forefathers did it and carved us out such a wonderful and strong land. And we better get learning pretty quick.
Wanted to mention to anyone just tuning in, our guest is Darmoon, and he's a geologist, and among many other call it talents that he has and skills, deeply rooted in science as well. And we're coming up at 8:17. We're at 9. Bill Colley on Magic Valley this morning on News Radio 96.1 FM, 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. We'll pick this conversation up after the break too, but we got a couple of minutes before we get there. When you referenced that there are additional rare earth metals, I'd heard that. I didn't know specifically where they are. But once again, it just takes the will to go dig them out.
Well, it takes will. It takes a lot of science. It takes a lot of expertise. Much of the location of these minerals was done early on from geologic reports from the Idaho and United States Bureau of Mines and Geological Survey. So we know we have them in the mining circles that I operate within. Yes, they're there in abundant supply, and many other locations throughout Idaho. And there's all good geologic reason for this. It might be a little too much for what we're talking about here, but we sit on top of vast metallic resources. Not only that, though. I mean, look at what Idaho does in the production of phosphate. Without the mines in southeast Idaho, we wouldn't be, the number 3 dairy state, because we've got to throw phosphate and nitrogen to those, alfalfa fields. And if you haven't noticed the price of fertilizer, you will come next fall, because it's 3 or 4 times the cost now, and that's going to be passed down. So there's some of that $30 trillion that we're going to be taking a bite of, and everybody is. So you're going to have to reach deep into your wallet for decades of failed policy, and it's just it's very sad. But fortunately, Idaho has a lot of very great big opportunities.
We got to get to a break. We've got more coming up with Darmoon. He'll continue with us after the short break. We're at 11 right now. And coming up on 20 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley on Magic Valley This Morning on News Radio 96.1 FM, 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. Couple of quick programming notes. Tomorrow we'll be joined on air by Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office, as well as we have Pastors Roundtable at 9 o'clock. On Friday, we've got the Gun Guys. They'll be joining us. Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pawn and Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense. They'll talk all things firearms and take your questions and comments. And don't forget, on Saturday mornings at 9 o'clock, it's Red Wave Radio, hosted by State Republican Party Chairman Tom Luna and his counterpart from Ada County, Victor Miller. And they'll be talking with some folks, what I call a real grab bag of folks serving in state and local government. All of those things on the way as the week unfolds. We're joined this morning by Dar Moon. He's a geologist, lives here in Idaho. In fact, as he pointed out earlier, he got a degree in this background when he was at the university many, many years ago. He's just about roughly my age, I should point out. And we're not bragging about that. We're at 8:23. It's 10 right now. And Bill Colley with you, too, on News Radio 96.1 FM and 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. The reason we're speaking with him is there's been a lot of interest lately in the cobalt mines in his neck of the woods near Chalice, and not too far away from there, actually. And there's been a lot of, though, also apprehension that has come from people. And I bring that up, Dar, because in conversations I've had on air about this, I will hear from people who, I know they're conservatives. They know that we need to stop dependence on bad actors around the world, that we need to be more independent in these things. But there's always a lot of that whataboutism. What happens if this collapses, or what happens if this falls down, or and of course, I'm sure when they built the Panama Canal, nobody was asking those questions, which did benefit the growth of this country tremendously. But I guess it's like the people say about Fukushima. Well, nobody actually died there. Nobody died at 3 Mile Island, but the stories persist that that those things happened, and we have to overcome that because a lot of people who I think are of right of mind still are afraid that there's going to be some terrible disaster that would befall us if we go ahead with this.
Well, we have to be mindful of the environment. I love Idaho. I love the lands. I live out there in the middle of nowhere, off-grid, surrounded by forest and beautiful scenery and wildlife. That is important to Idahoans. But there's no free lunch in anything we do. We have to be bold, and we have to take action, or we'll live on our knees. And I think many people are seeing how that could happen. We can do a better job than most countries do, most mining operations do overseas, and we need to do a better job. But we cannot live on our knees. We cannot, we have to go boldly into the future and thoughtfully into the future. We have to be able to offer our children a better life than we had. And right now, we are not. We cannot. And I think people need to really sit down and soul search a minute and understand from whence we've come. This has been a 50-year path down this highway to hell of good intentions. I reckon back to, John Denver singing about Rocky Mountain High and all the wonders of the environment, which really kicked off a concern for the environment, and unnecessary concern, but it has led us down a path that is unsustainable, and it has actually hurt our environment more than it has helped. And like I mentioned, I live in the middle of the forest that is devastated by fire each year, and mostly because environmentalists have locked it away. It's not logged, the forests are not taken care of, and we pay a price for that. And so does the wildlife, and so do our rivers with runoff. So this whole environmental thing has to be rethought. If we want to have a civilization, a modern civilization of convenience, then we better start taking care of it ourselves right here. And we can begin no better place than right here in Idaho.
The opposition would also come from not just people concerned on our side, but the left. I put up a piece about this about a week ago where I mentioned you'd have busloads of students coming in along with professors to try to get in the way of equipment, and then you'd have the tribes, which would be raising some questions as well, and talking about ancestral rights, and then you've got all of these issues you've got to deal with, and people will try to monkey wrench any project like this.
Oh, well, they will. Failure is an option. We can kind of go back to the dark ages if we'd like to. And these young people that are activists and don't see it this way, they've lived off the fat of the land and off the goodness of their fathers for generations now that won't be there. So at some point, we're going to have to make a decision, and that point is right now. Actually, that point is long gone. We are over the hill, and we need to draw this back. So, you know, sanity must come back to America, or we will, in this great reset, we'll have nothing, and I guess we'll be happy about it. But I won't be.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of good people in Idaho won't be. I'm hoping that we have political leadership that will help guide us the way. And I know a few out there that are on that stage right now. So we have choices to make. And they're not easy choices, but we have to make those in the betterment of all Idahoans and all America, because these resources we have here are strategic for the entire country, and without them, we'll be on our knees.
Well, I got to thank you for your time this morning, and on very short notice too. I should point out, would people allow me to talk to them with about an hour's worth of time notification. I'm always grateful of that. So,
Well, you're welcome.
but you're
Very
prepared.
welcome.
You're prepared. So you could do it on a dime. You could turn around and do it. We'll talk soon, I'm sure, because this is a story that's not going to be going away.
Very good, Bill. Thanks for the great opportunity, and we'll be looking forward to speaking to you soon.
And I'll give my best to your wife, obviously.
I sure will.
Hey, thank you. Dar Moon joining us this morning on Magic Valley this morning with Bill Colley on News Radio 96.1 FM, 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. Again, his wife is State Representative Dorothy Moon from the 8th District, who's often a guest on our program, and she's a candidate for Idaho Secretary of State, one of three big names involved in an upcoming May primary. Got to point out as well, that role would allow her to have some say about land use. She'd be on the land board here in Idaho, and she's got a very similar background, her same education as her husband, and so she could shed a lot of light on these issues if she ever ended up with that job. Is that an endorsement? Well, I guess it might be. It's 8:30. We've got more on the way. Bill Colley with you until 10 a.m. on Magic Valley this morning. Again on News Radio 96.1 FM, 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com.